Okay, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
So, if we do this right, if I do this right and you respond correctly, we've never had a conversation like we're going to have for the next hour and a half.
All right.
So, we'll see. We'll see if I'm able to do it right. I really needed about an hour to prepare. Instead, I spent like 10 minutes. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, I know.
well, just like one of my students.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I never wanted an A from history professors. I was happy with a B.
Yeah.
I know everybody wants an A now, but I don't. I never wanted A's. I just like to learn stuff. Professor, I have gone through about six of your speeches over the last decade, and I have them up on a Word document all together. And I should have cut and pasted the quotes that I wanted to ask you about, but I didn't. So I'm going to have to scroll down. So if it looks like my eyes are reading up and down while I'm listening to you, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
But I want this show, this conversation, and we'll try to go for only like 45 minutes of this whole, all your quotes for about 45 minutes. And then we're going to open it up to whoever's still with us 45 minutes from now to ask you questions on anything
Okay.
they want. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, first, you have given a speech several times, I think, but it starts out, well, it doesn't start out with, but the piece I like or I want to read is if you're a liberal Democrat, here's what you're supposed to emphasize. There is no fixed eternal truth. And you can either keep going, it doesn't have to be from memory, or I can read it to you and then you can give a
You
response.
read it to me
Cool.
because I always forget.
Cool. And then what I'd like you to do is expound upon it, or because we're
Oh,
not.
okay.
I'll
So,
read it to you. I'll read
yeah,
it to
yeah.
you. But then I'd like you to put a new twist because this was given a decade ago. All
Okay.
right. Ready? If you're a liberal Democrat, here's what you're supposed to emphasize. There is no fixed eternal truth or truths about human nature. Each generation can define the American purpose, make history conform to present needs. The government exists in order to be a broker between interest groups. You have a majoritarian ethos. The government should do whatever the majority of the people want it to do. Group desires are more important than individual liberties or economic opportunity. Your politics should reflect your identity politics, and you should use politics to change culture. So, do you still like those words? Do you still believe those words? Are those complimentary words to the Democratic Party and liberals? Do they agree with it? Will you kind of expand on that quote from a speech you gave 10 years ago?
It wasn't meant to be an insult. My advisor was Alonzo Hamby. He wrote lots of books about liberalism. Liberalism is what I studied in graduate school under, two or three guys who were uh, uh, experts in the subject and would have described themselves as being liberals. And I just took the definitions that they put out as descriptions of um, the beliefs of liberals in the United States in the years after World War II.
And so it's a compliment. You're describing what you believe as a historian academic, what liberals believe.
Well, I
Now,
don't know that's a compliment, yeah, because I would not describe myself as a liberal. But the other thing I would point out is that, and the thing that maybe people find most, uh, I don't know, hard to wrap their heads around is that in each one of those things, I'm talking about an emphasis. It's not that liberals deny, and this is what makes a liberal and not a leftist, is it's not that liberals deny that individuals have rights. It's that they emphasize that if there's a close issue that they're going to side with the idea of group rights over individual rights. That's my point.
yeah, okay. Yeah, and you do get to that later in the speech.
Okay.
So let's skip to conservatives for a second. It says, if you're a conservative Republican, let's not let you off the hook. And it's interesting that you're kind of critiquing both sides for not doing what they should be doing. That was
Mhm.
kind of one of the intents of the speech. Let's not let you off the hook. Conservatives, do you know what conservatism is? Because for 2 centuries, the definition has been the same: belief that the flaws of mankind are eternal and were correctly identified by founding generation. Governments are instituted among flawed men in order to secure inalienable rights. You believe in individual liberty, rights attached to you as an individual, not as a member of a group. You believe in subsidiarity.
Yeah, subsidiarity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you academics. Matters ought to be handled by the least centralized competent authority. Economic opportunity, rather than equality of condition at every level of government. American exceptionalism, properly understood. Moder, I got to get Jeff in here. How do I close this down? Moderation in making progress towards realizing our principles because of the
Hmm.
flawed nature of man, and that politics should reflect culture slowly. So
Yeah.
you said it stood for 2 centuries. It's been a decade since you gave this speech. Talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk about any piece of it, of either. I don't know if you want to start with liberals and work our way down, or start with
Whatever
conservatism.
your choice is.
Yeah, let's go back and start at the top of the list for liberalism, and I can sort of uh, just start explaining each thing. Or if you want, what's in front of you on the screen, and then I'll just talk about that. What's easiest for you
Well,
to?
I'd like to, what I'd like to suss out of this conversation is for anyone who digs this up on the internet in the future. I'd like them to go, wait, I'm a liberal, and I want them to read that and go, well, wait, I don't actually think through that like that most of the time. I'm, I'm for abortion, or I'm for more taxes on the rich, or I'm for helping the common man, or whatever we kind of think of the current issues that liberals advocate for. I'm against Trump. And if they think of the way they currently are and they read that, will they be aligned? And is it important for people to have principles, or should we just all fight over every damn issue? I guess that's what I'm looking for from these two, from liberals and conservatives.
I guess it just depends on what kind of person you want to be. It's a very personal thing. But
Well, hold on. The bigger picture, Professor, and you talk about this in several of your other speeches. I want people to, as you know, I'm trying to be a devout citizen. I think I am. I think I have been for a long time, but I want to like emphasize. I posted on protecting Somalis. I don't know a single Somali, I don't think. I just don't. But I don't think a whole group should be called garbage. And so I posted on that. Is it performative PR? Is it political correctness? Is it virtue signaling? I don't know. People can say that if they want. The bottom line is, I don't want a whole group of American citizens to be targeted as garbage. I think that's crap. And
mhm.
so, if I don't stand up for them, we depend on them to stand up for themselves? Well, that's a hard path. And so, I'm doing that to support an opposing group. Probably, I don't know. Maybe they are all Republicans, but I'm not a Republican. You know what I mean? I don't have any alignment with them. I'm not Muslim. So I don't have anything probably mostly in common with them, except they're American citizens. And that's good enough for me. So I guess that's what I'm trying to suss out from you is, what's it mean to be an American? And
Well, Abraham Lincoln, I guess, would agree with you in that what it means to be an American. And this is why, in a way, I'm going to answer both your questions at once here. Should people care about issues? Yes, that's never going to stop. That people are going to be self-interested and about things that they have a particular interest in. Higher pay for history professors. Like I am self-interested in that cause, right?
second, all in favor? Yeah.
Yeah, but this is where it's hard not to sound um, uncomplimentary and uh, mean, I guess. But caring about yourself is the lowest form of humanity. I mean, you don't have to be taught that. That's something that every human being has naturally. And it's part of our sinful nature that we're sort of born selfish and have to be taught not to be selfish. So caring about issues, it's not, I guess this is part of conservatism. That's not going to ever go away. You're never going to get away from the fact that there are going to be people in America who are self-interested. Our system of government takes that into account.
Or actually, even stronger, isn't it designed to prevent
Yes.
ultimate self-interest?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
But here's the other thing about human beings is that we are actually all capable of thinking.
Hmm.
So so it's part of human nature that we have both of these things in us. That the selfish part of us never goes away, but we do also have this other part of our brain where we're capable of thinking about the past, the present, the future. We're capable of being wise. We're capable of being nice. And but we have to be taught to do that. And Abraham Lincoln, in many speeches, but most notably in this unpublished document that's sometimes called the Apple of Gold document, or where he's describing the relationship between the Declaration and the Constitution, um, Lincoln explains that the only thing that will ever lead to human happiness, human thriving, the only thing that will ever give us, um, that will ever allow us to dream about a better life for ourselves, to work for a better life for ourselves, um, and to be creative in how we solve problems in our own lives, is when we realize that true success only comes through equality, which means we can only ever really experience happiness or success in life when we are protecting the rights of others, not when we're protecting the rights of ourselves. Because protecting the rights of ourselves, that's nothing. And I sometimes describe this in my classes as like, you'll only know that you won a game if there was a game and there were rules and there were referees. Because otherwise, I can't show up to a basketball game, at a park somewhere, and then pull out a gun and shoot everyone, and then make a basket and say, "I've just won a basketball game." Right? That's not a basketball game. I used violence, and then and then I put a basket through a hoop. That's not basketball, right? But when there is a game with rules, and there are referees, and then
And you all compete fairly. It's a
yeah,
level
and
playing field
everyone
with
competes
starting
fair.
line.
It's the equality that makes it possible for everyone to have a chance at success, so that so that when someone wins a game, they know that they won. But also, someone who loses a game has the ability to learn from that experience, get better, come back the next day and say, I'm gonna lose today, but I'm gonna get you next time.
That's
But that
great. I don't know if
that's
you've ever talked about that aspect of that
okay.
fragment of Lincoln's. That's great.
So equality doesn't mean equality for me. It means equality for the other person. So that's what where Americans have to get to. That's what you have to be taught. Is that the reason you should value equality to all, which is what Lincoln and many people have said. It's not just a Lincoln phrase to say equality for all, but equality for all is what protects my rights. And when you understand that equality for all is what protects your rights, uh, that then you are practicing, the values of what it means to be an American.
God, I love that. Later down in the same speech, Professor, you said this, and I'd like you to expand more on this because it's a word that I don't think real people use. And so at some point, I'd like you to be able to translate this word into something more commonly understood, either today or a year from now. Ready? And here's the kicker, kind of your lead up to the conclusion of your speech. And here's the key kicker. Liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, and Whigs before them all used to understand the concept of pluralism. And this is perhaps the greatest tragedy, since, as Jefferson once told us, this belief was nothing more or less than an expression of the American mind. Think of that, an understanding that we all share the same political values It was literally the definition of what it meant to be an American. If you can expand on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, and see, I mean, I was just listening to a podcast this morning that said, "Oh, I'm starting to believe in the horseshoe theory of politics, which is this idea that somehow the right and the left bend together and form a or that there's I don't know." But
Well, isn't that about extremism on each side, the horseshoe?
yeah, but I've always said that there's a much better graphic of that if we want to have a graphic depiction of the American political spectrum, just draw a circle and put American ideals inside the circle, and then
And that's
outside the circle you put everybody else because people who are on the right or people who are on the left object to American ideals.
and you've got to describe left and right though, because that sentence may not make sense for the layman unless
Oh,
you.
if you're somebody who believes that you would like to destroy the United States government in order to replace it with a monarchy or a theocracy, then you are un-American. You do not like the idea and do not believe at a fundamental level that human beings can govern themselves. And you are un-American. You are outside of the circle. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't even make any sense to put that on one side of the spectrum or the other. We call it the right as a legacy of the French Revolution, but the right and the left in the French Revolution were both opposed to the American system of government, and everybody knew it when it was happening. This isn't some sort of you know mystery or big historical I don't know thing that I dug up. I mean, I just finished doing a somewhat deep dive on John Quincy Adams for the last couple of months, and a little bit less on Martin Van Buren, but just kind of looking at the politics of the late 1700s through the 1830s ish, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere in their discussions. This isn't something like innovative that I just thought up. Like everybody understood that if you were denying the rights as they were spelled out in the Declaration and as they are supposed to be implemented in the Constitution, that
Lincoln's fragment on the apple of gold.
yeah, that you're un-American. That and if you're somebody who denies that individuals have any rights or that these rights are that an individual has rights as they exist in the world, as individuals, that you are denying fundamental freedoms that are fundamental to being an American. And it's not, I guess it's just like it's not on a line. It's bizarre to think of this as being on a line. It's a circle. Or some people call it in property law, they call it a bundle of sticks. Fine. You want to call it a bundle of sticks and like here's individual liberty, here's economic opportunity, here's, majority rights, minority rule, fine. But the American system of government says these are the things that you have to accept because these are the things necessary to human beings living in peace with one another and being able to govern themselves. And but within that bundle of sticks, everybody's sticks are different sizes, and everybody's sticks are different sizes every day, depending on the issue, depending on the topic, depending on my blood sugar level. Human beings, we accept that human beings are infinitely complex as well. But now I don't know how many metaphors I've managed
Yeah,
to
I've
mix
thrown a
here,
bunch
but
of.
uh,
Professor, I've never heard your circle before, and because I don't mind the horseshoe, I think it's better than the line, the linear line. But your circle one is intriguing. I don't think you've ever talked about that in our 150 shows so far.
uh,
But
I used it in class for years. I
no,
said
I don't think
I
you've ever
draw a
mentioned.
big line, and then I draw an X through it and say it doesn't exist. And I mean, we had Hiram Lewis on here, didn't we? And talked about the
Yeah,
myth of left and right. Um,
we
so-
did, but the circle is an intriguing one, so I got to think about it. What you mean is if you're willing to have the debate about I'm not sure about the Declaration of Independence. We're going to get to that in a second. But if you want to have constitutional debate about rights and liberties and responsibilities and what laws are, you're all within the circle. If you decide to use violence,
yeah,
you've gone outside the circle. You're not being an American.
yeah, and I mean, that's what the rebellion was. I can't. Back when in 20
And you
years
mean
ago,
the Civil War? Is that the
yeah, well, what people call the Civil War, the rebellion. Back when I used to give speeches on this, 20 years ago, every now and then somebody would come up to me afterwards and say, "Do you mean to tell me that the rebellion of the United States against Great Britain was legitimate because they weren't represented in Parliament, and the rebellion of the South against the United States was illegitimate because they were represented in Congress?" And I say, "Yeah, that's it exactly. Thank you. Thank you so much for attending my talk." In other words, like, um, they think they've got me. They would think that they got me, but there is such a thing as a legitimate rebellion. That's what the United States, that's what the American Revolution was. Um, but we also recognize that there are many illegitimate rebellions against rule of law. Yeah, and yeah, those are all illegitimate. We shouldn't. I don't know. There are a lot of things I always wonder, like, why are we tying ourselves up in knots about this? Like, it seems this is an easy one. This is not an edge case. Um, yeah, there are a lot of people who say, I would like to use violence in order to achieve political ends in a country where elections take place. And I say, well, you are not an American. That is an un-American activity. You are outside of the politics of the United States.
fascinating? Next speech. You were talking about the populism in this speech, but this paragraph that I pulled out isn't exactly on. Well, maybe. Um, the government failed, and that's the Articles of Confederation, and collapsed in chaos because what people want is not what is actually good for them in the long term. People want to attack unpopular minorities such as property owners. People want to borrow real money and pay it back in worthless money. People want to ignore the law when the law is unpopular. Because of this failure, Americans realized that in order to preserve the results of the American Revolution, we needed a new government that would preserve rights at the national level, making freedom and securing of rights the purpose of the national government. Alexander Hamilton called it the important question in Federalist One. Can human beings govern themselves? Talk
Yeah, these,
about it more.
yeah, these all sound like typical themes for me. And I'm sure when I was writing that speech, I was just looking at Federalist 10 and Federalist 1, um, because Madison and Hamilton both pointed this out, that what our government is designed to do, and this is, again, something I think a lot of people misunderstand. People think that what our government is designed to do is turn human desire into action, and that's not the case. It's our We're supposed to have a government based on reflection and choice. And what that means is reflection is different than desire. I might, call out my friends and want to go out to eat like probably the most unhealthy food designed by man, pizza, right? Like it's just
I mean,
starch
don't
and
be
sugar.
disparaging. So what's wrong with cheese and
I mean, it's all kind of bad.
all right?
But boy, is it delicious, right? But that's a desire. But if you were to ask me, what should human beings be healthy? Yes. What should um, 50, I forgot how old I am, 51 or 52-year-old man, uh, um, what eat for lunch? And then I'd say, leafy greens and protein, probably in the form of lean chicken and
Bean.
water. Yeah. And uh, you know, fruits and vegetables. I don't know. Healthy ones. In other words, reflection and choice are different than desire. And what our government is designed to do is force us into reflection, thinking about something after passions have cooled, and then choice, meaning we're supposed to apply human reason to that reflection. And that means a rejection of the idea that what's supposed to happen is we're supposed to turn desires into action. You know, turning desire into action means like I'm going to pull up the, Domino's delivery app and it's, my pizza's going to be here. Or, I'm going to walk over to some place and eat some French fries or something. But
So, so
so our government is designed to force us into reflection and choice and get us away from um, turning desire into action. But the human beings will never stop wanting their desires to be turned into action. So that has to have some place to go. And what we've designed is a system where desires get filtered into it, hopefully, eventually, reflection and choice.
So, Professor, I want to take it into a current event, or the current year. There's no doubt the president and many of our conservative friends who stayed in the Republican Party. You're still in the Republican Party, but I don't think you are aligned often. Um, get every damn immigrant out now. I was elected on it. It's a mandate. I'm going to do everything possible. Courts be damned. I don't need Congress. I'm getting every damn immigrant out now. And people think that's a feature, not a but, or they want that. There's a significant, probably minority, but even potentially majority of the people of American citizens want that to happen. Get them out. You're saying that our whole system is set up to not allow that to happen, even if you're the president of the United States. And so Congress isn't checking much, but the courts sure are. And state governors and populations, our American citizens are. They're not just saluting the flag, the new flag of the new president. They're saying, nah, hell no, I'm going to protest. So you're saying that's a feature. Good thing. The system's designed to slow things down, even if everybody wants it.
Well, it does. Extremists always want lawlessness. I mean, I do think that it's worth noting that that none of this has to do with conservatism or liberalism because liberals aren't supposed to argue that laws don't exist or don't matter.
Love this.
So liberals are supposed to believe that the law should be enforced. They should want better laws. So when somebody says, I don't want immigration laws enforced, that person has left liberalism behind and is now, inventing a new personal political philosophy. Um, and the same goes for the conservative. In other words, the person, I won't even call him a liberal, the person who says, I don't want the laws followed and that immigrant should stay, and the person who say, I don't care about the law and I want that person, I want that immigrant to go, they are both un-American. And it's not, those aren't conservatives and those aren't liberals. Those are people who have rejected the idea of law and they've rejected the idea of politics. They are not, these are un-American ideas.
Fascinating. I think we're going to have some questions here in a couple of minutes on that if they're still on the call. Want to switch gears slightly? Same speech. And this transitions into another speech, I think, if I cut and pasted right. Abraham Lincoln said our nation was conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Do you think most Americans really understand the Declaration of Independence and what it means? Do they understand the Lincoln's words at Gettysburg? Does that absorbed into their psyche that we are all equal, including our enemies, our opponents, our people we disagree with, different races, creeds, colors, philosophies? Do they?
No, because it's been taught incorrectly for generations now. So when you tell the average American you should believe in the Declaration of Independence, they'll say, "Oh, you mean the Declaration of Independence that meant only white men?" Like they've people have been taught for generations that black people and women and Native Americans were not included in that phrase, and that's simply not true. So people don't believe it's true. They think that it was something cynical, or they think it was, freedom just means freedom for white male property owners, or something.
Well, so
So
Professor, you've got to go into more detail on that because, as I may have told you before, I've argued with my deceased father over that for many years. I think that is a majoritarian opinion. It says men; it doesn't say men and women. We know that most blacks, not all, but most blacks couldn't vote. They didn't have their freedom. If you didn't own property, you practically may not be able to vote in many elections. So go ahead and prove that thesis you just said, because I don't think most people believe you. Anyone listening to this show without me asking this follow-up question ain't going to believe you. So try to prove it.
I can prove it in two documents. First, one that I've already mentioned, that said where Thomas Jefferson says to. I mean, there's more than this, but because everything I'm saying, there are thousands and tens of thousands of other documents that would prove it. But in the shortest possible route, uh, that the Declaration of Independence was meant to be the common sense of the subject. And that's that letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to Richard Henry Lee, where he said there was nothing new in the Declaration. And in essence, what he was also saying is that if you had tasked any of the founders to write the Declaration of Independence, they all would have said the same thing. There wouldn't have been any disagreement really about it. It was just handed to Thomas Jefferson because he was a good writer and because he was from Virginia, and they wanted a Southerner to do it rather than somebody from the North, and particularly they didn't want somebody from Boston doing it. But if John Adams had written the Declaration of Independence, it would have said exactly the same thing. Okay, that's document number one. Document number two is the original draft of the Declaration of Independence, which contained a paragraph uh, on slavery that was removed. But it was only removed because one or two people protested the description of slavery. That means that for the vast majority of Americans and the people who removed it, they didn't remove it because they thought it was wrong. They just thought it would be a harder sell in South Carolina or Georgia. Yeah, but the founders were united on the idea that when that term was used, all men are created equal, that it meant black people and specifically slaves. That was specified in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence. And if you don't believe me, just Google Declaration of Independence original draft, and
So,
it
so
come right
Professor,
up, and then skip to the end, and you'll see the phrase. If our fact checker were here, I could read it out loud for you.
so Professor, I'll give you that history that most founders and maybe most people in the United States were opposed to slavery in the founding of our Constitution.
Well,
But
what they were,
practically,
hold
they
on,
sure weren't.
but they were opposed to all ideas of hierarchy, of which slavery was the worst.
Right.
So
So
that
cool.
doesn't necessarily, but don't flip that to mean that they were for social and political equality instantly. What they believed they were doing was they believed they were creating a government that was going to undo every form of unearned hierarchy.
But they were willing to tolerate that unearned hierarchy for the rest of their lives, and until the Civil War, when there was a breaking point.
No, but again, that's misunderstanding the early history. By placing slavery in the individual states, the founders believed that they were handing states the tools that they needed to end slavery. Because during the Revolutionary era, that's what happened. And so, as far as the founders were concerned, they they thought they were implementing a system to end slavery. But it just happened that in some states, the people who lived there decided to use the tools designed to end slavery in order to preserve slavery, and then began using all of the tools that a representative government would have in order to preserve it.
So your point is all rights don't have to be at the national level. The first state that banned slavery, I can't remember. Was it Maine? No, it wasn't Maine. They weren't even in. It was one of the. I mean, it was a couple years after the after the
Well,
Declaration.
Vermont was an independent nation there briefly, and I think they might have been the first.
I mean, but it was fairly early on. It wasn't near the Civil
Yeah,
War.
well, because I think they declared themselves to be a sovereign nation, and they were more like Texas or Maine does, by the way, doesn't even come along as a state
Right.
until the
I
Missouri
remember.
Compromise. So,
Yeah, I remember.
yeah.
So, well, let's see if there's any follow-up questions on that in just 4 minutes. I need to get to one more theme
Okay.
that I really wanted. Oh, I love that quote from Coolidge. Where maybe we'll get to it later, but if element are created, equal that is final. If they're endowed by, what a great quote. Eisenhower had a nice one on that. We're going to skip that. Reagan had a good one on that. Okay, that's good. Let's go to. Oh, I do want to just mention this. You were the first No Kings protester. I had no idea that. This is fascinating. Looking at Google is amazing. This was like 12 years ago. You said, I will not support a king. One cannot both be a patriot and a monarchist. Those two categories are mutually exclusive in America. It should not be controversial for an American to take that position in any political party at any time. Thank you all for doing what you do to preserve individual liberty, American exceptionalism, and economic opportunity for all Americans. You were the first No Kings protester. Good job, Professor.
Well, I wasn't the first. There were a lot back during the Stamp Act.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I want to do this one more. Oh, gosh, I love your quote that you pulled out on the report on abolition put forth in the National Convention of Colored People in 1847.
Yeah.
Their insight was extraordinary and applicable today. 1, proclaim the truth and do not lie about it. 2, see your
Well, before you
problem.
get started, I want to say why this is so extraordinary.
Please.
Because in some ways it answers like some of the questions that I know people have, and a couple of them that are in the chat. What do you do when your government is lawless? When your government that they're answering, what do you do when you're the minority and you want to achieve social change, but it's your government that is doing the thing that is wrong. So now go on with.
Yeah, that is an important context because this is great advice. I mean, like if I were to ask you to write something new today and you were to do this, I'd say this is brilliant. But it was the National Convention of Colored People in 1847 that wrote this. I'll read it real quick and then we'll get one more point and we'll open up to questions. Proclaim the truth and do not lie about it. 2, see your problem clearly and act accordingly. 3, recognize that you are in the minority. 4, renounce violence. 5, decide on an individual basis who must be rejected and who must be convinced. That is so smart. That's just brilliant. Oh, I wish more people would think of that sentence. 6, do not alienate people of goodwill. Create goodwill and always encourage the best parts of our common humanity. God, that's just brilliant. 7, believe in truth. We need to be careful not to make errors out of what they called an unpardonable impatience or an aesthetic want of faith in the power of truth as a means of regenerating and reforming the world. 8, reject evil. They concluded, let us expose his crimes and his foul abominations. He is reputable and must be made disreputable. He must be regarded as a moral leper, slummed as a loathsome wretched, outlawed from Christian communion and from social respectability, an enemy of God and man. I love this kind of language. To be excreted, I don't know what that word is, by the community till he shall repent of his foul crimes and give proof of his sincerity by breaking every chain and letting the oppressed go free. Let us invoke the press and appeal to the pulpit to deal out of righteous denunciations of heaven against oppression, fraud, and wrong, and the desire of our hearts will soon give us triumph of liberty throughout the land. Oh my gosh, I'm just so delighted you put that into a speech and I read it. Any other thoughts on that? And then I've got one more big question.
Well, no, this is something that comes up all the time. It's a disagreement that I have with people who are activists. And this happened yesterday with somebody who I'm friends with. There are people out there who believe that what you should do is lie about things in and that a righteous lie is somehow helping your cause. And I just really disagree with that idea because of what they say earlier. You're trying to reach everyone who is reasonable, everyone who is a person of goodwill. And because of that, you need to maintain your own credibility. And if you do that, you will start convincing people because they're going to start saying, oh, well, what do you know? I fact checked this and it's true. Not, and not look it up and say, oh, this person is somebody who lies or exaggerates about these incidents. And what tends to happen in those cases is that reasonable people tune out and say, well, I reject both of you. And if it's I'm for slavery or against slavery, well, I'm rejecting both sides of that because they both seem to be liars. And if what you're advocating is true, you shouldn't need to lie about it.
You just let the facts stand on their own, and the people can make their own conclusion.
Yeah, and because that's the way to convince regular, normal people who can be convinced. But there are people who can't be. That's another thing I liked about that document because they say like we have to reject some of these people. We just say like, hey, Tucker Carlson, you're gone. Like we don't need you. You're a nutcase. Candace Owens.
Just out and out.
Like, yeah, like, and by the way, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Like, we don't need any of these people. Like,
well, Professor, I'd add in President Trump into that list.
Of course.
You just got to reject it. It is just crazy, so we've got to reject it.
Yes. President Trump is not, he does not have American beliefs. He is a mercantilist. People who think there's some sort of larger issue in this, whether he's going after Venezuela. Why is he doing what he's doing with Venezuela? Why is
4D chess, Professor, 4D chess.
Yeah, it's not 4D chess. It's the economic ideas of like a 16th century, monarch. We need to control the rare earth minerals. That regional hegemons should get to do whatever they want. And then
it's piracy under a crown.
Yeah, and then you sort of say, oh, okay, now his actions in Ukraine make sense. Now his actions in Israel make sense. Now his actions in Venezuela make sense. Like they make sense if you think of the person who's shaping policy as someone who has a kind of pre-American understanding of politics and wealth and money.
Okay, Professor, this is helpful. Thank you. We're out of time. Well, we have plenty of time for Q&A, but I missed a whole segment. I wanted to spend a third of the time on your recommendations of reading about race. It is really a nice, concise, if you care about race in America, do. But read these following things. Get some history under your belt so you can speak thoughtfully and artfully and convince people rationally. It is really a brilliant speech, and I'll post that again soon. It was given in 2017, and it's really nice. Starting to talk with Edmund Morgan's American Slavery, American Freedom, and it goes right down the path of reading some really thoughtful people. I'm about halfway through, and I know we've been doing this 5 years. I'm going to end with this and then open it up to Q&A. One of your speeches, you end with this: I hope to live a long time. I hope we all grow old together. This is to a Republican Women's Club, I think. Someday, if we're lucky, we'll all have memories of time spent in defense of liberty rather than excuses to explain our failure to act. Our children will not be ashamed of our legacy. In the traditions of the Republican Party, our rights and liberties are individual, but so are our obligations. We are not free in order to be selfish. We are free in order to give of ourselves, our highest and best commitment to the cause of liberty. The charge is the same now as it has been in all the struggles against all forms of totalitarianism and tyranny. Do your duty. That's what I kind of think Americans should be about. I know this was designed for Republicans, but I think you can take the same principles and put that in the Republican Party. Fight against tyranny. Do your duty. I just really love that paragraph.
Well, there's probably a pretty good reason why I was giving speeches like this in 2016 and 2017, right? Because I was trying to convince a bunch of Republicans to be Republicans.
Yeah.
And I will say the funny thing is, now that we're in the year 2025, when I talk to people stood alongside for decades, they are all embarrassed and they're all ashamed of what they've done since 2016.
Well, wait, you and I are not. You and I are not ashamed.
No, but that's because I resigned. I said there was a line, it was crossed, and I left. I said I can't be a part of this.
Oh, so you left the party officer.
Yeah, right.
Stayed a Republican, but left the party officership.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, okay.
I got out of advocacy of as the Republican Party was taken over by the Trump and his supporters. And I want to make a distinction between Trump supporters and Trump voters. I always want to make that distinction because there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump and saw him as essentially like, this guy's just as bad as Hillary Clinton, but he's slightly better than Hillary Clinton and he's slightly better than Kamala Harris. And I never want to slander those people. Like,
I agree. They want to lower the scope and size of the federal government, so they figured he has a better shot of it than anybody else. So I'm going to vote for the guy who wants to lower.
Yeah. And they told us the story that he was going to be effective, whatever. But I'm talking about people who looked at Donald Trump and his desire to destroy the Republican Party and thought that was a good thing. And as a Republican, I couldn't side with people like Steve Bannon, who said he wanted to destroy the Republican Party and then was invited to speak at the Republican convention the next year. It's like, what world are we living in?
It was just today, I posted on Facebook, 10 years ago today, I was part of the Central Committee delegate selection to replace a state senator. 91 of us voted. In that instance, we voted unanimously. So I was a party activist today, 10 years ago. Then 6 months from now, I was so adamant that I resigned the party after 32 years. And so it's interesting that we've taken slightly different paths on trying to I always thought I was protecting the party more by being outside of it, saying this is so bad that everybody get out until we can take. I thought it was going to be a non-Republican for 3 months, from June until Trump lost. I don't know, Professor. I don't think I can ever go back. Maybe. I want a party that fights for the things that you've been writing about in your speeches. Let's open it up to Q&A. So anyone of any topic that is addressed today, what does it mean to be an American?
Well, can I handle some stuff that came up in the chat?
Quick. Oh, yeah. You do whatever you want, Professor. This is your show.
there was a question about advocating disobeying the Fugitive Slave Act. And the idea is that no, they were not un-American. There is, in a way, what we talked about with that document about how do you protest against um, a law that is in place. And there is a way to engage in civil disobedience, but civil disobedience does not mean fighting cops when they're following the law. It means you submit to the law and let that bad law be enforced so that the system breaks because this bad law is unenforceable.
Becomes
And
unenforceable. Yeah.
so I just want to make sure that we tie those things back together
Well,
again.
and Professor, in a previous show, you gave some sound opinion that I haven't seen all over the internet. And as you know, I've gone to 15, I think, of the protests this year. 15 protests I've gone to kind of report on, and it's really sound advice. Tell the cop right in front of him, say, "Please don't hit me," and I'd rather not be gassed. I mean, here's my hands. Arrest me, take me into the jail. I'm civil protest. I'm going to disobey your. I'm not moving, but
But
please
I
don't
don't
hit me.
say
I don't
know the
want to get
laws
hit.
in your state because they're all a little bit different. In almost every state, you do have to surrender your ID to the police officer. You do have to roll down your window. They are allowed to detain you. In every state has their own magic words about saying, "Am I being detained?" And if you're not, and if they say no, then you can just turn around and walk away. But if they are detaining you, then a whole different set of rules. Um,
But
uh,
there's no to your point though. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to hit. You don't need to push. You just
yep.
just go to jail.
Yeah.
You know.
Yes.
I mean, that's
And
the way it
you
goes.
don't have
Go
to
to jail.
say it. You don't have to. But almost every state says you have to say who you are, and if you have an ID on you, you have to provide the ID. And if you're driving, especially, yeah. But again, all 50 states are different. But if you're going to engage in protest, know what your state laws are with regard to um, detention.
Cool. Something else from the chat, or do we open it up to
No,
Q and
that's
A?
good. I just wanted to handle that.
That's the only one that you want to handle. Okay, cool. All right. Let's see. Our libertarian is gone or not? No, Nicholas. We usually allow people that haven't been here a lot to ask a first question if you'd like. You don't have to. But Nicholas, yeah, there you go. What's your question or comment?
Um, so I apologize because I had a business
Oh,
call
don't worry about it.
so
What's
I
your
might have
question?
missed it. The question that came up was the idea that rejecting the enforcement of an unjust law is fundamentally un-American, which I don't think tracks with liberalism. It probably tracks with Burkean conservatism better. But my bigger question, since Professor Tootle is a historian, is kind of like what relevance do you see in the wide awakes and the election of 1860, and whether or not we're back in a zone of a moral conflict within society and a resurgence of, I would say, militant republicanism.
Hmm.
Man, smart people. And somehow, Professor, if you know an answer to this, kind of dumb it down. Well, dumb it down's wrong, but to translate it to the American citizen, me.
Okay. I don't think that we're in a period that is quite that unique because if you look at almost every, I don't know, 10 to 12 year election cycle, there are things that are like this in almost every election cycle, every 2 years, every 4 years. There's always a group of people who want to translate their morality into public action. And I mean, in essence, it's the difference between, or it should be, an important difference between Republicans, Democrat, or let's say it this way: traditional conservatives, traditional liberals, and libertarians. With libertarians being the people who are most likely, they're supposed to be the ones who are most likely to say that uh, that there are many things that are a bad idea that should still be legal. And not every good idea needs to be turned into legislation. You can just enact your good ideas and bad ideas um, as an individual without forcing those ideas on others. So I guess I would, I don't know, in the broadest possible sense, there are always people who want to take their ideas and use politics in order to force them upon others. That that never goes away. That's there in that's always present. And um, hopefully there are enough people around who either the um, oppose the policy combined with the people who oppose the principle to force those people to show slow.
Let me force my way in, and then you can ask a follow-up, Nicholas. So, Professor, your answer confuses me. I think that this is a dramatic time. I mean, I think not up to the Civil War, but
Let me use an example of smoking, right? Like I don't smoke, but I don't want to ban smoking in private homes. But I would want to regulate smoking in public. So, does that make sense
but in a minor way, I'm talking big picture stuff, like is our constitutional republic going to exist?
Yeah, but it's the same principle, I guess. Or it's the same issue. Or how about that? You give me an example, and I'll.
Okay. I even though I support the article, dreamers. I think young people that were brought here as children, they can't make that decision themselves. They did not commit a crime, period. By under our whole system of jurisprudence, they have not committed any crime.
Mhm.
I think they should have a path to citizenship,
Yes.
but at least a legal status to stay here. However, Obama didn't have that authority to do so. Congress has to give that authority. So even though I like the result, the process didn't allow that. Similarly, scores of things that President Trump has done. So, I mean, just scores of things. Yeah. And that's just not good for our system to be pushing it that hard. And so maybe I'm not understanding your question.
I think we're agreeing with one another. That's a perfect example.
Nicholas,
so I guess, yeah. So the realignments in American politics tend to come when there's a split on an issue of morality, something that cannot be compromised over. And this is kind of the tragedy and irony of Lincoln, in that he was known primarily for compromises prior to his election. But the one issue that couldn't be compromised over, the issue of morality and slavery and whether or not that is or is not American, that's a fight that has to be won, and yes, it took less than the time the Golden Girls were on the air, but the failed war to preserve slavery went down in flames. The problem is there's this pendulum resurgence of people who are unhappy that they lost that war, right? And so you get the end of Reconstruction, you get Till Dinner Blood, you get political violence being used to overthrow the results of an election. And the thing that keeps me optimistic as we
direct lineage on this issue from slavery.
No, it's pendulum style or spirally, okay. Right? So you have the second founding is Reconstruction, right? 13, 14, and 15. But then you also have another round of it in the end of Jim Crow. Then you have another round of it in the Civil Rights Act era. You have another round in the gay rights era and Obama getting elected. And this fundamental divide of whether or not all men are created equal, or whether or not there is a hierarchy based on racial characteristics, that argument isn't over. even though it had been won resoundingly through force of arms, there are always people who want to go back. And what we are seeing right now in the United States is an administration that is pursuing explicitly white supremacist ends in order to resegregate the United States. And I think that what the whirlwind is what is going to be reaped by sowing this wind, by ignoring court rulings, by claiming presidential immunity out of whole cloth. And just a little historical constitutional quibble, John.
And make it brief now. I'd like to hear
I will make it super brief.
Oh.
Which provision of the Constitution allows the federal government to enforce any restrictions on migration?
Okay, so Professor, I like a lot of what Nicholas is pointing out, and I'm really going to be fascinated on your answer to see if I agree with you. Professor Doodle.
Well, I guess I can pull out my Cato constitution, but
it's going to say naturalization in it, so you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Watch out for smart attorney.
Does it say Congress has the power to regulate?
Nope, just naturalization. Right. So whether or not you can become a citizen is a delegated power to Congress, but actually controlling the migration of free people is not constitutional.
I'll have to look.
There's no black letter for it. You can read the cases and see if they're persuasive to you, but
yeah,
I'm unpersuaded.
Libertarian constitutional lawyer, Professor. I don't know if this is fun or not. What do you say, Professor?
Well, just take me a second, and we'd be left with dead air if you wanted to pause.
We've never had dead air in 150.
Yeah. But what's his question? Does he have a question?
No, the question is whether or not you see us going back towards a deep moral conflict in the United States over what is American, over whether or not segregation or racism can be American.
Yeah, the only thing I would quibble with you is the idea that there's some sort of a pendulum that's swinging back and forth. Like I think the need for education on the value of political equality is ongoing, and that in many of the years that we don't pay attention to because there are other big things going on in the world that these.
Well, Professor, let me interrupt you.
Crowded out.
To your analogy, isn't the circle of Americanism, American ideals and principles, then getting smaller right now? Seems like more people are willing to be on the outside of the circle.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, does that answer your question, Nicholas? And you may not have been on the call when he gave that.
I think that the argument over what is or isn't American is, we are a creedal nation, right? This is not blood and soil. This is, if you come here and you abide by the principles in the Constitution, you are as American as anybody else, whether you were born here or not. And there is a rejection of the idea of a creedal nation. And that rejection is ongoing in waves, whether we're rejecting the Americanness of slaves, or we're rejecting the Americanness of Chinese railroad immigrants, or we're rejecting the Americanness of people of Japanese extraction, rather, who were actually born American and yet interned, or we're rejecting the Americanness of Somalis most recently. That is a fundamental anti-American strain in American politics. And that fight will continue until it's resolved.
And Professor, you're saying it's always been a fight.
It's not necessarily a strain that's present in American politics. It's a strain that is present in human beings. These things are not, a tribal inclination. Is not something that is uniquely American. Selfishness is not uniquely American. I just always want to point this out, that's encompassed in the earlier discussion where I say that human nature is flawed, but it's not that human beings are perfect, but that we are capable of governing ourselves. But we have to.
Professor, though, isn't it true that one of our reasons we've been doing 150 shows over 5 years is to counter this new stream of racism or tribal instincts or use of violence. And we want people to go back to American traditions, the principles of being an American. I see what Nicholas is describing daily in my real friends that are willing to violate the law because they want to move people out of the country. They don't care about the law. They want the people out. And I've even had a conversation last week. They go, well, the law did change. We have voted Trump and he promised it. Congress did have a say in the ability to Trump to do whatever he wants because we voted for him. He has a mandate. And I just like pull my hair out with checks and balances and written a new, 10th Amendment, but not only the 10th Amendment, our whole system of governance is like being willing to be thrown out the door in order to get what we want. Isn't that the reason we're doing these shows, is to have people think through how to be an American and how to fight for the people that can't fight for themselves?
I mean, one would hope, but I always said we fail. This is not, we do our duty not because we think that it's going to work. We do it because it's right.
I think it'll work. I think it'll work. I don't like the pessimism inherent in conservatism, but that's part of the reason I'm not a conservative. The idea that people are inherently flawed or bad is anti-liberal, right? Liberalism believes
Not
in
that people are
we're pro-social.
bad. It's that people have within them inherently bad characteristics that are balanced. You don't think so?
I think that there is an inherent self-interest, right? I did listen to the earlier part of the talk, but I don't think that people are inherently selfish. Anthropologically, if you look at it, people are inherently pro-social. And that's why disasters bring people together and don't usually result in a decline of social order, is people work together because humanity is a common thread.
Because of another common human trait, which is we want the approval of our immediate tribe.
Right, and we're empathetic, right? We have the capacity for empathy. We have the capacity to get outside our own shoes.
For empathy, it coexists along with our tribalism, along with our self-interest, and that these are all inherent human traits that are all being balanced in an infinite number of ways.
And we speak to the better angels, right?
Well, we hope
we don't say that there are no bad angels. We just try and cultivate the better.
Yes.
All right. I love this conversation.
But that is the heart of American conservatism, especially as distinguished from European conservatism or post-war US.
Yes, because we're conserving a creedal nation rather than conserving a monarchy. However, Burkean conservatism still does not have an answer. No. I'm just saying that strain of American conservatism does not have an answer for racial prejudice or slavery, because it is an institution that did exist by law, and there's no way out without a liberal rejection of it.
Right. Which is why I would have never.
Right.
I consider, but I do sort of, I'm sympathetic to I'm sure you're familiar with Chesterton's fence.
Right. You'll upset the apple cart.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the idea that we need to know the reason we're changing this rule before we change it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think the fence is a good heuristic.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, that was fascinating. I really do love that. I will tell you, I am one of the 99% of American citizens. Even though I have a political science degree, a law degree, and been doing public policy and politics for 40 years, I don't know what a Burkean conservative is. So I am with the 99% of not having any idea what you guys were talking about in that narrow window. Let's move on.
Someone who believes that because an institution exists, there's a fundamental goodness to it, because if it was bad, we would have gotten rid of it before. And that is the simplest, I think, explication of Burkean conservatism.
Yep.
Is that the way it is good, right? It's status quo conservatism.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. My role as facilitator is to help people understand what the heck is being talked about. Okay, Hope. You haven't been with us for a few weeks. You don't have to ask, but if you have a question, now's your opportunity.
Oh, she just said she has to leave.
Gotcha. Jeff, any thoughts today, or Bart? Bart, we always like hearing from you. or Jeff. Okay, Bart, you're up.
Here, hang on. Just took me a minute to unmute.
You're up.
A quick, I don't know. I have sort of an observation. This conversation has been really, really fascinating. One of the things that, well, okay, I'm just going to come out and say this, and I know I may be attacked from all sides here, or at least within our conversation. There are certain, I'm comfortable with the fact that there are certain issues that our society has decided and that we don't really need to relitigate. Equality of races in our society. To be very honest, I think the Civil War and the Civil Rights Movement settled those issues. It's great that there are certain people in our society right now, I guess the Tucker Carlsons of the world and these people who theoretically are arguing that we should go backwards, that somehow, I don't know, blacks are not equal to whites and all this kind of stuff.
Bart, the President of the United States says a group of American citizens is garbage. You think this is settled? This is the active current President of the United States talking about a group of American citizens.
And there are probably about 70% of Americans who really don't listen to very much of what that man says. Okay.
I'm concerned that 70% of America, not 70, but 50-ish% of Americans might agree with that statement.
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, sorry
I don't know.
I just wanted to challenge it. I'm not sure that's settled. I'm truly not sure that's settled. Anyway, keep going.
No, it's just kind of an interesting, that's kind of the thing that I wanted to get Stephen's impression on.
Oh, sorry to jump in with my own then.
Yeah,
hey,
no.
So we all jump down your throat. Okay.
No, and that's totally okay that you jumped down my throat because I was kind of expecting that, to be very honest.
I know you said so. Okay, Professor Tootle, reaction.
So the first thing is that I think you're right that they don't need to be relitigated, but I do think that they need to be retaught. And I also think that in an academic setting that it should be okay for a wide latitude in terms of dissent and asking questions. But we shouldn't confuse,
absolutely.
I used to say this all the time, like, people, I wrote for the Claremont Review of Books, and I didn't have a problem with a couple of kooks at Claremont. The problem became when you put those kooks in charge of things. Like smart kooks should be allowed to ask questions and be academics, but they shouldn't have king-like powers at the federal government to overthrow elections. But on a sort of basic and social level, we have to keep teaching these issues because otherwise people feel like they have no choice but to become a reactionary and let their beliefs be defined by just being the opposite of some activist who's doing something wrong.
So, Professor, on a real level, real world issue that's going on right today, gerrymandering and the president forcing Republican states to do it and the reaction of Democrats to do the same thing. And I say no to both of them. People are willing to just give up shouldn't everybody have a free and fair vote to choose their representatives? And the answer is everybody on both sides, no. And I what do you mean no? And so, Bart, I would have thought that the movement of we didn't need to relitigate this. Gerrymandering has always been bad. It's been understandable, but it's always been bad. But now we're going backwards. We are relitigating it.
Right, but we're not really relitigating gerrymandering. What we're litigating is whether you can gerrymander essentially based on race. That's what that was all about. Now, the Supreme Court refused to deal with it, but that's really what they're arguing about. And Donald Trump saying disparaging things about Somalis in Minnesota, wherever the hell he's talking about them being. I don't know that he's doing that based on race as much as he's doing that based on their status as immigrants. That's a different thing. And they're a convenient
You're right on that.
target.
Yeah, but in the same breath, he talks about the Scandinavian countries. I'm not so sure you're right on that.
But he also, I mean, Donald Trump, he just doesn't investigate
Well,
or
that's
ask
probably
questions of when people who are his toadies tell him things.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as one of his, toadies says something to him, he doesn't ask questions. He just repeats it. I mean, I think
yeah.
I listened to that fairly long interview that he did with Politico last week, and it just became clear that he doesn't really know anything. Just people tell him things, and he repeats these words.
Well, he has some guttural instincts, though, and the instincts aren't right. I mean, he does have a guttural core group of instincts, and appealing to populism is one
Yeah,
of them.
but I would say those instincts are the instincts of uh, a mercantilist from,
Okay.
from
Yeah, it was all in the Music Man. Okay, cool. Jeff, do you have anything to add or questions or comments? Or are you traveling? I can't remember. You may be, yeah, go ahead, Jeff. You might be on the road. Yeah, you're on the road.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. I have to be on
Good.
speaker.
And we can see you
Can you hear me?
and see you.
Okay. I hung up on something earlier in the call, so I'd take Professor Tootle back to his comment about the intent of the founders, all believing that, well, all
almost
men are
all.
created equal. So I'd ask you to restate that, and then I'll ask a question.
Oh, I would just say that
It's about
almost,
unearned hierarchy.
yeah, just that uh, almost all of the founders believed that what they were doing was setting up a system to get rid of unearned privilege and unearned hierarchies. But there, not exclusively, there were varying degrees of beliefs about it, but it was an almost universal belief among the founders.
And you covered in that light.
I think he asked about slavery. Was that what it was? Um, I think he was asking about slavery. Yes, there were certain people, even among the founders, who believed that the problem was that the crown was um, perhaps interested in ending slavery. I, I don't know. It's hard. I'm trying to guess what your question is.
Oh no, I don't. Maybe I got cut off. My question was about gender
Oh, gender.
because females weren't included in that equality, and you had made a pretty broad statement about most, if not all, of the founders had intended for
Well,
the
it's one of those
differential
things.
between races to
Yeah,
erase.
I got you. It's one of those things that's almost like asking the founders about spaceships. And what I mean by that is that the evolution of the idea of rights had almost all come from the idea of family with and so the I and even in the American experience, um, almost everything in the law dealt with households and property ownership. And at the time of the American founding, this is the idea of individual liberty is still being disentangled from the idea that rights go to, you have some rights as an individual, you have some rights as a property owner, you have some rights as a member of a family, but that the law was most laws, especially at the state and local level, would have still um, been really focused on the family being the legal entity. Um,
Well, so Professor,
So translate that into the rights of women.
yeah, and let me ask a follow-up on that. Professor, I am 59 years old and I'm constantly surprised on how many things have happened in my lifetime. You know, as you're a kid, you don't really pay attention that women couldn't open a bank account on their own until whatever it was, I think 73. Interracial marriage, gay marriage, which is one of the new, I mean, there's all these things when all men are created equal. Well, except until the 70s when you can open up a bank account. I mean, for a woman, that's pretty. If I was a woman, I would treat that document differently. Would I not? Wouldn't I think it didn't apply to me?
No, because those are the principles you are appealing to.
Well, I get the vision. I guess it's a great ideal, but still I can't open a bank account. So great
That's
ideal, America,
That's the
but
point. You have
practically.
it creates the ideal that you appeal to, and you say, shouldn't I be able to? And that what has happened, generally speaking, is we've had a society that has worked from big to small. But even still, slavery was the biggest issue, right? But in addition to the biggest issue, there were also the rights of poor people, and what happens when you get rid of property qualification is that in many cases things get worse for black people and women because we've let poor people vote. And now our system has to work out both of those things. In each one of these cases, what we're committing ourselves to is the peaceful system of making progress and working through each of these issues. Um,
So I love that point, and I'm with you on that point. But the famous Fourth of July speech? Go ahead, Americans, you can celebrate it, but it ain't my holiday.
Frederick Douglass, but Douglass also changed his mind. Like that represented Frederick Douglass at one time in one year, but he felt differently the year before, and he felt differently the year after, and he was a complicated guy. But Martin
But
Luther
you're a
King.
fan of Douglas, right? The whole Douglas. You like him being complex.
Well, I like every human. I mean, every human being is complex. Yeah, but when people try to reduce Frederick Douglass to one speech that he gave instead of looking at his entire life and the arc of his political beliefs, because in many ways he was, I mean, actually, this relates directly to what you're talking about. He changed his mind on all these issues. He was working through these issues. I just finished, like I said, working on this thing on John Quincy Adams. And when he first met John C. Calhoun, he thought Calhoun was like a great and noble person. And then he went off to go be a diplomat. And he wasn't really confronted with issues of equality and slavery and women because he was busy at work, talking to the czar and stuff. But once he comes home and he's confronted with these issues, well, now you have to start making choices and taking a stand. But everybody in American history is, all human beings are not stagnant, and it takes time to get to the part where you have convinced, X politician to take Y position, and then what do you know? He has a heart attack, and now you got to start all over with the next one. But what you're committing yourself to is the peaceful resolution of all these issues. But there's never going to come a point when we say, "Oh, problem solved. We can close up Congress." Like you said, that you work on the next issue and you make mistakes, and then you hopefully settle on something that approximates equality, and then you go on to the next issue because there's always going to be something that pops up.
All right, Professor, we have 2 minutes left. Want to ask a big question that it's impossible to answer, but give it your best shot. You've talked a lot about what it means to be an American, and it's a process and it's a learning thing, and we have to constantly work on it. And your speeches are, I actually think you're an optimist, not a pessimist. But I do think both the sin and the love are all within each of us, not just the other side. And, so I can adopt both of those, but I think most of us are basically good most of the time. Most people are good most of the time,
Right.
but we all have that opportunity to be bad, and we got to watch out for it.
Yeah.
So, Professor, if you're acting in an un-American way by not pursuing the principles of all men are created equal, what's the penalty for an American? I mean, we have freedom of speech, a freedom of association. We have, I mean, when we say you're not being an American, well, what do? Slap them on the wrist or say, be better? I mean, how do we expand that circle of your analogy? How do we get more people to be, and if they're outside of it, I mean, sure, if you're using violence, you get thrown in jail, but most of us aren't using real violence. We're a fairly peaceful society. You have 1 minute. What is the recommendation to
start with
America?
the idea that the most fundamental freedom that we have is the right to individual conscience. So you absolutely have the right to be wrong in your own home. Um, but every individual has the right to conscience. So I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to vote for you. I don't have to say I agree with you. In fact, getting back to the Fugitive Slave Act, one of the reasons why the new Fugitive Slave Act was so offensive to Northerners was because it compelled action on the part of Northerners. And they simply said, I will not do this. I'm willing to let this bad thing go on somewhere else, but I'm going to protest when you force me to take part in it. Um, so, on a basic level, the question, what is the penalty? And the answer is, if you're sitting in your own home, nothing. There should be no penalty for being wrong about things. But you know, like everything, the minute you leave your own property, you begin to have to take into account the rights of others.
Okay. I think we'll end with that. Thank you for your time today, Professor. Are you available next Friday?
I think so, because we're halfway through finals week. So hopefully by next Friday, I'll have all my finals turned in.
Next Friday, I promise to put in 20 minutes of preparation instead of 15. We're
Okay.
going to do a year in review, what America did and didn't do in the year 2025.
And I'll look up where the necessary and proper clause is in Article 1. I know it's there somewhere.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Nicholas, thanks for joining us. Jeff and Bart, awesome. Professor, have a great day. Happy holiday season here as we get closer to Christmas.
Yeah, awesome to have Nicholas here today.
He was, he's a smart guy. I disagree with him about 30% of the time, though. He has some wrong issues. And I'm saying this just for your benefit.
Well, I've always said, like, I want a libertarian in the room always.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's never a time when I don't want a libertarian making the libertarian argument.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, I agree. Thanks for joining us.
And that gets back to what Bart was saying, how do you disagree? Well, I always want at least one person taking a slightly more extreme view than me, and making me defend, the thing I just said.
The thoughtful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You always, but that's one of those total corollaries. I always want one libertarian in the room.
Now it was a compliment. Now it was an insult. I don't
mean that. I don't mean a limit, but I just mean, like, I always want, and the other thing is that they're never shy about.
That is true. Smart ones are never shy, and some of the dumb ones aren't shy either. But Nicholas is one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. Okay, gentlemen, thank you all. Have a wonderful, well, not Christmas yet, but we'll see. Hopefully, see you next week. Thanks for your time today.
Right on. Great to talk to you.
Do your duty, says Professor Tootle. Do your duty. Have a great day.